I remember being there, but not ever speaking up. I think those beginning days there's such a fog now. Like when I look back, I remember bits and pieces of them. They opened their arms to her like she had always been there. Like if we go back and go through all the what ifs, our lives wouldn't be where they are right now. You know, you just don't know what's going to happen. You don't know what's going to, happen in the future. I think those beginning days, I think there's so much confusion.
Yeah.
So much confusion. People are saying things that they don't really know enough to speak on. You can only get help if you're willing to talk to people.
Hey guys, welcome back to the Journey After podcast. I'm your host, Jordan, and today I am here with two very special people, Haven and her birth daughter, Sarah. Haven is a dear friend of mine that I met who is also a birth mom, which is super exciting for me to have on today to be able to discuss a little bit more about what that looks like and to see how her daughter now is such a big part of her life, which is my hope one day to have with my birth son. And so I'm very excited to have them both on today to discuss all the things of their life and to hear about Haven's journey, to hear about her daughter Sarah's journey, and to just share with you guys what kind of the flip side of this looks like. And so I'm so excited. Thank you so much for willing to come on today to share your story and to just educate other people about what this looks like and to just be vulnerable and share that. So thank you guys so much for coming on.
Yeah, absolutely.
So do you guys want to just share a little intro about yourselves? Anything interesting, like what you do,
a lot of interesting stuff between us. I'm Haven. I'm Sarah's birth mom. It kind of is interesting how we met too. And that you were at the very front end of all of it. And I was, obviously my birth child is an adult, but I remember that night, I remember telling Sarah about you, and telling, some of my other family about you. And I just said, it's just crazy to look back that I was there at that point, a long time ago. And it really did kind of have me go back and kind of think through all that again and like sit in it. And some of it good, some of it bad. I was really excited for you because I thought, like, gosh, she's so brave. Like, she's reaching out for help. She's saying she's not okay. She's saying she needs, someone to talk to. And I remember being there, but not ever speaking up. And so I remember just being instantly like, felt like I was connected with you in some way because I was like, she's like so brave. She's just doing this completely different than I did. And so it really got me thinking about things. And I remember telling Sarah, I was like, my heart breaks for her, but like she at least has support. She's reaching out to people who've been through the similar thing. So I just want to say that is one thing that really impressed me about you.
Yeah, I was like 2 months.
Very
I think
new.
Less. Wait, it was barely 2 months that when I showed up there. I remember that. I remember feeling so uncomfortable. Showing up. Okay, for what we're talking about, we showed up to a birth mom dinner that was hosted by Brave Love. And so it's basically a dinner that welcomes birth moms, support, to meet other people, to connect. And so I showed up to that very early into my post-placement journey, and I connected with Haven. Actually, the thing that stood out about you to me is when you said I'm a Jesus lover or something, and because there's not a lot of birth moms truly that love Jesus and walk in that path. I noticed a lot of, honestly, like hatred towards it a little bit in other support communities that I was looking towards. And so that was a big thing about my life. And so that kind of like is what made you like stand out to me that I wanted to connect with, because I knew at the end of the day, you were a birth mom, you were able to connect with me, but you were also rooted in the foundation that I would want someone to support and encourage me in. I loved that about you. But
I think I even said that night, that I completely get why there was some, maybe bitterness, frustration, underlying feelings that people hadn't been supported by Christians or church people. And so I think that's why I specifically said, I didn't say I'm a Christian. I said, I follow Jesus. I love Jesus, because it can be very polarizing when you say, I'm a Christian, because in my circumstances, I definitely knew I wasn't sharing what I had gone through with Christians, because in my experience, being a preacher's kid growing up that way, they were some of the most judgmental. So I knew for sure I wasn't sharing it with other Christians, because I didn't want to be judged, looked down on, all of the things. You know, I just was looking for support. So that was one of the things. But I did remember I noticed the same thing, and it really did make me sad, because, you know, something had to have happened along the way that they made that choice. And then they felt like maybe people weren't supportive who were claiming to be Christ followers. So I think that sometimes that, and with such a sensitive subject, you know, that would be something that would kind of, people would say, do you know what, I'm just not going to go there.
Yeah, no, it's definitely, it's a touchy.
Introduce herself.
Yeah, okay. Okay, so Sarah, would you like to intro a little bit about you, who you are, what you do, anything interesting, special, unique?
So my name is Sarah, and I am Haven's birth daughter. I found out at 18 that I was no longer an only child, that I had 5 siblings on both sides. I'm the oldest of 5 on both sides. And that goes right along with I've always loved kids, and I'm actually a teacher. So
I love that. What grade do you teach?
I teach 1st grade.
Oh, that's so sweet. So you found out at 18 that you had other siblings? Okay.
Yes.
At what age did you hit when you found out that Haven was your birth mom?
It's something I kind of always grew up knowing. I always knew that I was adopted. I never knew Haven's name until I was 18, and my mom actually gave me a letter that Haven had written right after she had me. And she kept it locked away somewhere for years, and I read it, and, you know, her letter was a lot about, I don't remember exactly, but it was a lot about her worrying that I would be mad at her. And I was like, that's crazy. Like, I had never even thought to be mad at her. Like, I didn't give it a ton of thought growing up. Like, I knew I was adopted. Like, I knew that she was somewhere out there, but I, like, remember going in stores and I'd be like, I wonder if that's her. Like, but because I don't look like any of my family, so I think that's what it was for me, is like growing up I wondered what, like, I came from, who I came from, because my family doesn't look anything like me. I didn't even know that I was Hispanic until I met Haven. So
that was actually one of her first questions, because I'm thinking she's gonna have all these deep questions. I was like, well, yeah, like, ask me anything. And she was like, what nationality am I?
Yeah.
And I was like, are you serious? Like, you don't? And I was like, you're half Hispanic, and my family is kind of a mixture of a lot of things. And so, and I told her, and she was like, oh, because her whole life she had been, you know, people would ask her probably, you know, like,
people
when you see
ask
her
me all the time, and I was like, I don't know, I'm adopted, I have no idea.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I didn't know that until I met her, but
oh, I love that. No, that's funny. That was the first question. I've always thought about like that when my son gets older. I actually wrote a letter too for him. I actually wrote it the day before I had him, so I was still pregnant. And I think in my letter somewhere I literally was like, you're literally kicking the inside of my stomach right now.
I wrote mine.
I
wrote mine. I want to say it was maybe like only a couple days, because she came early, and really we didn't know when she would be coming, because I didn't go to the doctor. I was in denial. I'm a classic, like, put my head in the sand and just like pray it goes away. And obviously we know it's that doesn't go away. So it kept getting closer and closer to the due date, or what we thought was about approximately the due date. And her adoptive mom I worked with. So I actually chose her adoptive parents. Or I kind of say, if you don't believe in God, like, I don't believe in coincidences. And where we worked, there weren't that many employees. It was at a bank. And it was, the irony of it is that I worked at a bank. And if you know anything about me at all, like, I can't balance a checkbook to save my life. So the fact that I got hired at a bank was an act of God. Then my direct manager that kind of just took me under her wing and was super loving and caring and all of this, and didn't know I was pregnant. So nobody knew, and I hid it pretty well. And I mean, I was young. I was 18 years old and scared. Was still living with my parents. Couldn't tell them. And so I just kept praying about it. Like, every drive home, I would pray, like, what am I supposed to do? Like, I knew that adoption was going to be my plan, that was going to be the best case and the best life for her. From really early on, I had grown up around a lot of adopted, like, families that had adopted kids, and then kids who had been adopted. So I had a really healthy view of it. But But the one day I just asked her mom to go to lunch, and I said, so I'm pregnant. She was like, oh, congratulations. I was like, no. And then I asked her, like, just at lunch one day, I said, would you adopt my baby? And hadn't met her husband yet or anything. They had been married like 10 years. Mm-hmm. They had been trying to adopt, had been on a list. And she was like, well, yeah. Like, and I remember even saying, and I don't know why it was a thought in my head. I think maybe because like just being around people and people can say some rude things. I was like, well, is it okay that, you know, she's half Hispanic? Her mom looked at me like I was crazy, like, okay, like that's not a problem. Like, but in my head I felt like maybe that's something they want to know. But she was great. She actually took me to her doctor because she's like, you haven't been to the doctor at all. So they kind of guesstimated when she was due. And based on when they guesstimated, she came like 3 weeks early. So I'm glad that I did write that letter when I did, because I don't know that I could have with all of the, you know, post, like having the baby and the hormones and all that stuff. I don't know that I would have been able to. But I had forgotten all about that until she told me that she had read it. And I was like, oh, wow. I don't really remember what it said at this point.
Yeah, I haven't looked at mine since the day that I wrote. I saved it to a file on my computer and put it on a flash drive, and that was that. So, okay, you touched a little bit on this. So, like, your pregnancy journey, you know, when you found out, what were those emotions? Like, what opened that door to consider adoption? And then, like, obviously placing, like, how was that kind of whole process kind of like for you?
It was shock. It was in my senior year of high school, and her birth dad was a boyfriend of mine from when I was younger. I grew up really, really conservative. My family was very strict. They sent me to a boarding school partially to get away from said boyfriend. And so, of course, my family moves across the United States thinking we're going to get a fresh start. And yours truly decided to call ex-boyfriend and be like, hey, I'm still alive. So he came out here, and it was very quickly that I realized that the relationship was not going to work. But Sarah was already a thought. So found out, gosh, it was right after I'd graduated high school. So I think I just wasn't even thinking about things. And it was maybe a thought in the back of my head, but then I just kept going with, you know, all of the senior year stuff and, you know, getting ready for all that. I knew that I wasn't going to go to college immediately. And then I think probably that summer I kind of reality just kind of struck me in the face. And I knew based on who her birth dad was at the time, I didn't want there to be any custody there or any chance of custody. I knew she would be open to that. And so the main reason was I wanted her to have a 2-parent household. Not saying that if you're adopted that always happens, but my goal was that she would have 2 parents and that she wouldn't be going back and forth. It would have been a battle between him and I, or his family and I just didn't want to do that to a child. So that was really a huge factor. And I didn't, you know, it wasn't her fault. Like, she shouldn't have to deal with that. You know, I mean, him and I weren't going to be together. I will say that, you know, he's changed as a human being for the better. He became a believer years ago. And so we kind of all have that in common. So I kind of joke that he's probably the healthiest of any ex I have, like, relationship-wise. Like, I can actually have a conversation with him and there's not, you know, bitterness and all that. So from that perspective, I was not able to get in contact with him during that period of time. I don't know that I want to share why, but Sarah can share that if she wants to. But so he didn't know about her until fairly recently. Mm-hmm. And so I just, you know, like I said, it was neat to see you kind of reaching out and wanting to talk about it and just to be able to say, like, I'm not okay. Like, I want to say it's a luxury. I didn't have that option. There were still very polarizing views of people getting pregnant when they weren't married in the church. You know, my dad's a pastor. We hadn't lived here that long. Then I'm in the Bible Belt on top of that. So I was, you know, hoping to just not get stoned, you know. At this point, I was like...
You didn't even use your name at the hospital?
I didn't, no. So I went under an alias in the hospital, which, funny story about that. My ex-husband's current wife is the exact name that I used as my alias. Tell me that's not funny. I think that's hilarious.
What?
I chose my best friend from high school's first name, and I chose somebody else's last name and put them together, and that's who I went on, like, in the hospital. It was crazy. So, anyway, so yeah, I did that so that there wouldn't be news stuff, with my dad being a pastor and all that. I didn't want anything to come, backlash on him. It wasn't my parents. I was an adult, barely, but I was an adult, and so I didn't want anything to come back on my parents. And so I chose to do that, and then went to one counseling session and was like, I'm fine, and I'll just move on with life, and I'll be good. And then, your life at some point, unhealed things will always catch up with you, and they did in really big ways over a decade ago. So I think now I really do love that kind of the narrative about adoption is changing, and people are so much more open to talking about it and hearing about it, and honoring people that have a different opinion or made a different choice than them. And I've always said that I don't judge anyone's decision, whether I think it's right, wrong, or indifferent. That really doesn't matter. That's between them and God. And I'm here to love people and talk to people and be there for people if I can. But everybody makes the best decision that they can with what they know and what they're going through, and so if somebody makes the decision to place, like, that's something I have personal experience with. Like, we can talk about this. But I've also had people that have, made the decision to end that pregnancy, and they've talked to me, and I've been able to have that conversation and to pray with them or love on them. Everybody's just doing the best they can.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, this is everyone's first time living.
Exactly.
And I tell myself that a lot too when I think about conflicts and stuff that I get in. This is literally everybody's first time, being a human on this earth. So, okay, question, just because, like, coming from myself and, like, I know the things that I felt, and honestly, it's actually coming up on a year, so my son turns 1 next week. And so all these things are kind of coming back around for me. And so I feel very isolated when I think about how I felt at the hospital, how I remember feeling when I left. And some of the birth moms that I have met are like, oh no, I didn't feel any of that. Like, I didn't regret my choice. I never was sad, or things like that. And so it makes me feel like super isolated that, oh, and what am I feeling is wrong. So, like, can you touch on any of that? Like, can you relate in that way? Can you not? What were, like, those kind of first couple weeks, even, like, the hospital, leaving, being, what, were you still 18? What did that kind of, like, look like a couple weeks, months post-placement?
A lot of the very beginning is a blur. I remember my parents had family in town, like an uncle and aunt that came to town, and they were doing this big, there was some, I want to say it was a Panthers game, there was some big tailgating event that I was supposed to be going to, and it was like, I think I was maybe 2 weeks postpartum, possibly 3, and I remember just sitting there thinking to myself, like, not one of these people knows that I literally just had the most horrific experience of my life, and not one person around here knows. And I think because I wasn't good at figuring out how to share my emotions, I have a really good relationship with my parents, but I just didn't feel like they would understand, and I didn't feel like they would be comfortable talking about it. You had my mom, who this was technically her first grandchild, so she was grieving that. And my mom, I was always worried about protecting her emotions because she was more sensitive than I was, is what I had grown up with, like what I felt my whole life is, well, my mom is really sensitive, so I can't do these things, or I can't say these things around her because her feelings are going to get hurt. So I feel like I spent a lot of my time those weeks after making sure that she was okay, or trying to not talk about it. The only time that I really cried in front of my mom was driving home from the hospital, and I have never cried like that in front of my mom to where I couldn't catch my breath. Like, it felt like the wind had been sucked out of me and I couldn't breathe. I was hyperventilating. And I remember just looking over her driving, and she was crying, and she just kept looking over at me like she had never seen anything like that. And I could not get it together. Like, I remember in my brain saying, like, pull it together, like, stop. I couldn't. Like, I just could not. It was that, like, that heaving sound that you hear on, like, movies, But I will say, those feelings, they don't ever, and I've said this, and I think maybe it frustrates some people, for me, those feelings have never been regret, but there has always been sadness. So even today, I still have moments that are sad. You know, when she came back in, it was a constant reminder of everything I'd missed, watching all of my younger kids go through those things. So I still remember the one time she slept over with her younger sisters, my other daughters, and I went in there to say goodnight, and they're all three like in their little, beds. And I remember I had to leave because I was getting that lump in my throat. I had never tucked her in, and I knew that she had been tucked in a million times by somebody else. So it's those types of things where it doesn't ever go away. It just doesn't. But there are things that I find joy in that make it where I've never regretted my decision. I've always known it was the best thing for her. She's an amazing human being, and she has a lot of the traits of her adoptive mom and a lot of things that I really respect about her mom. So I think, when people are like, oh, but time heals all wounds, it doesn't. Yeah. It doesn't.
Yeah.
It gets you further away.
Yeah,
I know. They're like, just give it time. You're like, are you kidding me? This was a year ago. This was not that long ago.
Yeah.
So I would say I know that you kind of have an open adoption, correct? So it's a little bit different. Sometimes I feel like for me, that may have made it worse. If I was seeing her on a regular basis, I think that would have, for me and my personality, that would have probably made it worse or harder. But for some people, that's, they need to just see that their child's doing well and, they're well adjusted and they know them. So I think those beginning days there's such a fog now. Like when I look back, I remember bits and pieces of them. I just remember trying to keep everything in. Like if I can just get dressed, go about my business, go about my day and not think about it, then I'll be fine. But the second that I would start thinking about it for a while, and I love kids, like Sarah was saying, she loves kids. I love kids. I have forever. I had always wanted a huge family. I'd always worked in some sort of childcare. I love kids, but there was a number of years that I couldn't be around babies. I didn't want to, like, hearing a baby cry would, I don't want to, I hate the word trigger, but it would, kind of set something off in me where I was like, I hope that she didn't ever cry and was wondering, where her mom was, but she has a mom, like all those things that seem so irrational to other people, but it's not something that ever, like, it's not like, I think it's been made to be like, oh, well, you just gave your child away so that you could, that's not how that works. That's not how that happened at all.
Yeah. I had somebody once say to me, and this was like something that hurt so bad. And it was like, I don't understand like why you're so upset when you're the one that chose to do this. And I'm just like, doesn't take away my feelings or emotions. And I mean, it's not like that's what I wanted to do. I knew what it was best, but there's a difference of knowing what's best and respecting that choice by doing that and then wanting it to know that like it's what you actually want to do.
Right.
And so like I had to kind of like really sit there, and something that I told myself a lot right before I gave birth was like, what do I feel like is best for my child and for the situation that honors God? And I would have to remove like my selfish fleshly desires of like wanting to be his mom, because of course my body is pregnant. I'm starting to like want to have a baby. I'm starting to think about all these things, and it was like instilled in me as a woman. And so I had to sit there the weeks before and just be like, I have to remove this of myself because I'm a sinful human being that of course is going to want what I want, but it's not what I also know that it's going to honor the Lord in the most beautiful way and give my son every possibility of knowing Jesus, being raised with two parents that love him, and then also still getting to be a part of that one day. But it's hard. And then when people kind of sit there and question, like, I don't understand why you're upset or you shouldn't be upset. It's like, well, no, like, I'm still human. I still have feelings and emotions, and there's still pain within this because we live in a world that's full of grief, loss, pain, and all those things. And so, I don't know, that's something that this past year I've noticed a lot of when people don't understand, or when people say, oh, you just gave him away. That's not true.
When people think that so much of life is mutually exclusive, that, you have this, but you don't have this. And there's a lot where things meet. So just because something is the right decision doesn't mean it doesn't come with pain.
Yeah.
So to do the best, like I would have never taken any of my children to get shots if that was the case. I don't want to see them cry. I don't want to see them hurt. but I knew that it was the best thing for them. So it's kind of one of those things where just because something hurts and is painful or sad doesn't mean it wasn't the right decision. And I've said that all along. Like, I know that my decision for her was the right decision. It doesn't mean it doesn't still come with some sort of pain or grieving.
Yeah.
And you do grieve at each stage. I mean, she's a full-grown woman now. And you think that, like, it gets easier. Like, I got to go to her high school graduation. I was super thankful for that because that was pretty shortly after we'd kind of reunited. She met all of her younger siblings, and they all fell in love. And that was the other thing I was worried. You know, I hadn't told her younger siblings. They were still young.
Yeah.
So how do you have that conversation when they don't understand how kids get here anyways? You know,
Yeah.
so I'm like, this is gonna be awkward. And the only thing that one of them said, I want to say it was Sienna, is she said, "I'm not mad at you that I have an older sister. I'm just mad that I didn't get to know her longer." And so I think they opened their arms to her like she had always been there. Especially the youngest, who's kind of like her baby at this point, because they're inseparable, you know, and they're the bookends. She's the oldest, he's the youngest, and you would have never thought that they didn't all grow up together, that they didn't all know each other their whole lives. So that's been one of those, the joyful parts, but also the like, well, you know, and then your mind starts going on all the what ifs, you know, and Sarah and I have talked about that. Like, if we go back and go through all the what ifs, our lives wouldn't be where they are right now.
Yeah.
You know, you can go back and you can think, well, what if I had done this? What if I hadn't done this? What if I'd done this? And we wouldn't be where we are right now.
Yeah.
You know, good or bad. So I wouldn't trade the relationship that we have now for any of that pain. I wouldn't, because you can have children that you raise that grow up and stop speaking to you.
Yeah.
So, you know, I have a child that I didn't have the honor of raising, but I have a really close relationship with her. So, you know, you just don't know what's going to happen. You don't know what's going to, you know, happen in the future. I think those beginning days, I think there's so much confusion.
Yeah.
So much confusion. People are saying things that they don't really know enough to speak on. And if they do, it's just like when somebody loses a family member or something, people say things that you're like, why do people say that? You know, like, but a lot of times it's they don't know what to say.
Yeah.
And, you know, when you're, you know, I remember sitting in my counseling session and I was telling about, you know, I'd placed my daughter for adoption, and the counselor said, well, how long ago was this? And I was like, no, last Monday. And she started crying. And I was like, I'm not sure what's happening here. And she was like, well, you seem to be doing remarkably well for, you know, just going through all this a week ago. And so I took that as, I'm doing remarkably well. I'm fine. That, like, I hadn't even cracked the surface. That was like the only person I had told. So I think a lot of it is you can only get help if you're willing to talk to people. You feel safe. And I think continuing to create a safe environment for people to ask for help, or even to just say, I'm a birth mom. Like, I placed my child for adoption, not worry about what people are thinking.
Yeah.
I think that's important. And, you know, I think a lot of it is just, I think my faith had a lot to do with it. I think that there are a few times in life that I specifically remember asking God to show me himself. Like, and that was one of the biggest times that I remember him revealing himself to me. So in a real way, like in a very tangible way during that time. And so those moments are kind of what I clung to. I mean, I talked to myself and God like during that time. I mean, that it sounds silly, but I did. And that was where kind of that relationship ended up growing from, that was all I had to talk to.
Yeah.
You know, and it wasn't something I felt like I didn't want my mom to be sad. I think my dad was kind of stuffing his feelings like I was. And so I talked to God because I didn't tell anybody else.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
So I think that's where a lot of, I can be mad, I can be angry at God, I can have all kinds of things to say to him. But at the end of the day, I know that when I'm at my weakest, if I cry out to him, that's where he shows up. So
yeah. Oh, I love that. No, so that was a great perspective from your end. Now coming from you, growing up, can you like just share like what life was like growing up? At what age, like the youngest age, can you remember being exposed to the fact that you were adopted, meeting Haven, all those things? What was that like for you?
So I do remember when I had to be really little because it was one of the first houses I remember. I just remember knowing that I was adopted. My mom would say things here and there, like I sounded like her, or I looked like her. But it wasn't ever, it wasn't something that I had given much thought to, because it was something I just always knew. Like, it was a fact. Like, I just knew it. Growing up, I was an only child, as I said before. So it was just me and my parents. And when I was getting older, like, as I would see, like, my friends they had their siblings and they were so close to them, like, I'd be like, why don't I have that? Like, I would beg my parents for a sibling, and every Christmas I'd be like, can I please have a sibling? And it never happens. They were like, no. So I think my mom probably would have, but I think my dad was like, no, like, we're good. Like, I was a really good kid. They were like, let's just settle with this. Like, we're good. And when I got to high school, like, more people started asking me, like, what ethnicity I was, and, like, it kind of made me think more about what I might have been. And as odd as it sounds, like, I gave some thought about, like, what Haven might be doing or what she might look like, but I never really gave my birth dad a thought. Like, I mean, I knew it took two, but it wasn't something I really ever thought about as a kid, because I had just heard stuff about Haven, even without knowing her name. I'd heard things about her, but it wasn't something I'd given a lot of thought to. And then in high school, my parents' relationships kind of started going downhill. And I think my mom just thought it was a good time to, let me know that I did have a birth mom, that she told me, I'm sure would love to get to know you. Like, she did tell me that, and she gave me the letter, and she actually had saved, like, she had, like, this little scrapbook that she had made of pictures of me and Haven in the hospital that they had taken, and then, like, little newspaper clippings from when she was engaged and when she got married. So I think the biggest shock to me was that she was right here. Like, she'd been right here the whole time. And as a kid, we lived in Florida for a little bit, but for the most part, I was always here. So it was really shocking that she was literally right here. And so then I reached out to her on Instagram pretty quickly after I read her letter.
I love that.
Mm-hmm. And imagine getting that, like, notification. I'm literally, like, standing there, dropped my phone. My mom was living with me at the time. And she was like, what? And I was like, Sarah just messaged me on Instagram. She was like, well, message her back. I was like, I know, I just didn't, like, it was like one of those, like, out-of-body experiences. Yeah.
Oh, my gosh, I can't even imagine. So growing up and stuff, being kind of exposed to know that you were adopted, but from your perspective, because I think this is, like, something that I think about all the time, is, like, what's my son going to think? Like, is he going to be happy with the family and things like this? Or, growing up with two parents and stuff like that, being young, going to school, like, was that something you, like, look back and are, like, super thankful for?
Yeah, I had a great childhood. Like, I think, you never know any different. So on y'all's side of things, you're like, well, it could have been different. But for us, it's like, that's how it's always been. Like, we don't know any different. We don't know that there was another option. But yeah, I have really fond memories of growing up, and my dad was my playmate because I didn't have one, and my mom joked that he was a kid too. And so, we had a lot of fun together, and we took a lot of trips to Disney. Like, they took me to do all kinds of stuff. I
love that.
Yeah.
So, and this is another question that I wrestle a lot with, and I know you kind of, like, touched a little bit on this, but the biggest fear I believe I have is that my son's going to grow up one day and hate me and hate the decision that I made, or think that I don't or didn't love him. Coming from now an adopted daughter, what is your kind of, like, statement towards that, or perspective towards that, to other birth moms that may feel that way about their birth child, that have that fear that I have?
Mm-hmm. I mean, I feel like, it's all we've ever known. So it's not really, it was never a thought in my mind that I would hate her. But that was probably 80% of that letter that she had written me was like, please don't hate me. Like, and it was not something I ever really thought of. I'm sure if I had had a rough upbringing, maybe. But I had a really good childhood. So there was no reason for me to have any hate towards her. So.
What was it like the first time you guys, like, met? Like, what did y'all do? What were, like, the emotions there?
It was at the Arboretum.
Yeah,
really?
It was at Panera Bread.
Mm-hmm. Yep, very random. And what was crazy is that I remember being so nervous because I was like, this is, like, your one shot. Like, if she thinks you're cuckoo, now when she meets you, like, then, like, she's never going to want to, talk to you again. And so it felt like the most high pressure job interview I was ever going to, like, to get some job that I had actually technically already done, but, like, just to have a place in her life in some way. And so that seemed like a very, like, lofty goal to me because I didn't feel like I deserved it or had the right. And so I was very nervous. I felt like she looked a lot like me, which is funny because all of my other children are very blonde. And so they didn't really, start out. Some of them look like me, but she had a much more striking resemblance to me just because we share the same dark hair and all that. And so when I first saw her, I was like, oh my goodness, like she's brunette, like she has dark hair, which I knew she did, but it was just one of those things that you see this like kind of mirror almost, you know, you felt like she looks the most like me. And then I think she walked up and said, like, I think we both said, like, you're so pretty or something like that to each other, like, at the same time. And then we sat down and just talked. She's a lot more reserved with her feelings, emotions, stuff like that. So I was just probably blabbing a mile a minute because nerves and all of that. And
but it felt very natural. Like, I remember it feeling very natural. Like, I don't think I was really even that nervous to meet you. I was just showed up and I was
what
good.
was your perspective on it? Like, were you like going in there, like, what was your, like, I hate being like, what was your intentions with it? But like in your head, did you have like a vision of what you wanted? Like, as in a relationship with her, like kind of, was it just free for all?
I think in the beginning I was more like, yeah, she's cool, but I really want to meet my siblings. So I think I was more centered towards my siblings in the beginning. And I think our relationship came later. It was cool to meet her and cool to find out like where I came from. And I wanted to know, about my birth dad at that point. I finally had given him a little bit of thought by that point. And I wanted to know, where I came from, like how they met, and stuff like that. But our relationship didn't really, I feel like, start forming until maybe a year after. Because I was just so focused on the kids and I wanted to have sleepovers with them and I wanted to take them everywhere. And like, I just like went full force into being a big sister.
Yeah. And at this point you were 18 or were you, okay.
Yeah. 18.
So what kind of then sparked like y'all's relationship to get closer and things like that? Obviously being a year into knowing each other and stuff like that, obviously you've probably built a connection. At what point did you guys start to get kind of really close?
I feel like it just came with time. As we spent more and more time together. I mean, I was over at their house a lot because I was always hanging out with the kids. And even when I went off to college, I came home a lot. I remember my first Halloween at college. I didn't know that it was a huge thing, and I'd promised my siblings I would come home and spend Halloween with them. So I came home for Halloween to spend Halloween with them, and I feel like over time our relationship just began to grow and definitely centered around the kids a lot at first, but I almost feel like I'm their other parent because anything they do I want to know about, like any accomplishment, like I want to know about. And her being a single parent, I feel like that was kind of nice for her to have because she didn't really have anyone to share that with before.
Yeah, and that is exactly what I'd say. It's, one of the things that you grieve being a single parent is having the other parent to like send the cute pictures to and send the cute things that they did. And, you can maybe do that if you like end up getting remarried or dating somebody. They don't really care. It's not their kid. They don't really care. Like, let's be honest, not like a mom does. And so she was the person that, I still send all of the stuff, even when, when they're driving me nuts, when they get in trouble, when they, you will never believe what and send the text. But so she is kind of a parent, but they did gain the best, I mean, really on both sides, her dad's other kids as well, have all benefited from her being a sister and getting to be a sister, which, obviously she never had that before, but to take that on, and then you're not just a sister to like one or two kids, you've got 4 siblings on each side, that she is very intentional about spending time with and getting to know. And, I joke with them all the time that, like, y'all don't deserve her. Like, y'all don't deserve her as a sister. Like, and she has her own life. I mean, she has her own life and teaches and all of that. And, they'll go help her in her classroom or come read, and all of her students know who all of her siblings are. And so it is really sweet. And it's been very redeeming for me to be able to watch, because you don't ever know. We both have Ephesians 3:20 tattooed somewhere on us. because that was my verse. And when about maybe 2 weeks after she got in touch with me, I had the tattoo immeasurably more tattooed here. And that's what Ephesians 3:20 says, that he can do immeasurably more than all we ask or imagine. And it's true, because I just wanted her to not hate me. I was like, I just want her to somehow understand why I made the decision I did. And yeah, God outdid himself on that one. Wow. So
that, like, I'm just like in shock with how beautiful, like, y'all's story has like unraveled, and the relationship that you guys have. Like, I want so desperately one day with my son. And I guess, like, another question, like, for you would be, did you ever feel like scared or nervous that you were upsetting your your parents with wanting to spend time with her, get to know your birth family or stuff like that? How did you navigate kind of like those relationships?
Yeah, I feel like at first I really struggled with that because I didn't want to hurt my mom's feelings. And that might have been part of the reason that in the beginning our relationship didn't form as quickly, because I didn't want my mom to feel like I was replacing her. But even now, it's not like she's my mom. Like, we're like sisters, really, but not like no one could ever take the place of my mom. So I feel like that's kind of been established through the years that, no one can ever take her place. And I think my mom knows that now. But in the beginning, I think I worried a lot about what she would think. But with her and my dad's marriage, kind of going south, in the beginning, it was a lot of just like my mom would come with me to stuff, and then Haven was single too, and then her mom was recently single, so it was like all these women, and then I would hang out with the kids, and it was just us and the kids in the beginning. And I think that helped a lot, because she got to see that it wasn't like she was trying to take me away. Like, my mom, like, she wanted to form a relationship with my mom as well.
Yeah.
Again, because they already had a relationship a long time ago. But
so what was that like for you, building that relationship with her? Because I guess for me, I didn't really know them before all of this. So, like, what would your, like, kind of like maybe advice or like encouragement be for like building a relationship with her mom?
I think it's hard because it's kind of like, too many cooks in the kitchen kind of thing. Because even if I'm not her mom, in the sense that I didn't raise her, you still feel that attachment in that way. So I still consider her like she's my child. Like, there is some of those kind of like jealous feelings. You talked about the flesh before. Those are going to be natural. Like, you can't help that. But I think because I knew her mom and knew the type of person that she was, it didn't cause me to feel like threatened or anything like that. I feel like I was more cautious about her mom's feelings, and asking Sarah, like, like, is your mom okay with this? Like, and does she want to come over for Thanksgiving, or, what about Christmas? Like, we want to have, because my kids all have this new sibling, and I have the missing piece, is back. And so I'm like, so how do we do this where everybody can be happy, and trying to figure that out. I think it just takes a lot of communication, which I'm not typically good at. I will wait till the last minute because I don't know how to say something, or I don't know how to not step on people's toes. And so I think I would just say to just try to keep open lines of communication, and know that this woman who's raising your child loves him as much as you do. And that's hard to imagine for a mom. It's hard to imagine anybody loving my kids any more than I do. But she does, and she wants to raise him, and she's committed to raising him. I do think there has to be understanding on both sides, because I remember blowing up, I don't know if Sarah remembers this, but I had someone that said, I think it's disrespectful how you're interfering with her and her mom's relationship. And I was like, disrespectful? Like, I haven't interfered. I don't feel like I'm just being me. I don't feel like I interfered. And I remember kind of really getting enraged about it, because I said, do you know what? In the last, I don't remember how old she was, maybe like 22, 23 years. In the last however many years, no one's cared if I felt like someone stepped on my toes, if I felt like slighted, everybody just assumed, well, you made the choice, and so you can't be upset about it. Like, this is just, okay, but I made the choice because I felt like it was the best thing for her, not for me.
Yeah.
For her. And so then it's hard when you feel like people don't try to understand, well, Haven still feels like a mom in every aspect. and she's had to step back and say, but I'm not her mom. Like I gave up that right intentionally. And I think I got so frustrated because it was like forever I'd been hearing about, well, as a birth parent, they raised your child. And so you just need to be careful about, well, nobody was careful about stepping on my toes. No one was even had a thought to, well, I wonder what the birth mom is feeling through this,
Yeah.
So I think it's taken me so long to actually be able to say that out loud because I never felt like I had the authority to say it. I think there was, well, I made this choice. This is just the consequences of my choice, and I just have to live with it. And so I have to kind of sit in the back and just kind of watch and not hurt anybody else's feelings. And there are feelings to be hurt on both sides, and an adoptive mom is going to get her feelings hurt if she feels like the child is bonding, with their birth parent. And I think both just have to be mature enough to say, my child has 4 parents that adore her, and there are some kids that don't even have 2. So if you look at it in that perspective, she had amazing parents, has amazing parents that she has a healthy relationship with, even in the sense of her birth father. I wasn't all for it in the beginning because I only knew what I knew of him from 20 plus years ago. And now that I've seen their relationship and, the steps that they've both gone through to kind of get to know each other, it's one more person that she's going to have in her corner. It's one more person to love her family, her kids, all of that. And that can really be a testimony. If you're sitting around as a kid and you think about, like I think about her kids, because I consider that I'm going to be a grandmother in whatever way that ends up being. Imagine those kids and what a testimony it is to be able to sit there with your, Sarah's parents and then her birth parents and then all of her biological half siblings and all of this. I mean, life's messy. Like, and to have it to where if everybody gets along and can, communicate and express themselves and let people feel what they're going to feel, it could be amazing. And it really could be such a picture of Christ's love for us and the families that he puts together, and how he can redeem things. It really can be. I think it's just going to take communication and a lot of grace, like a whole lot of grace, because it's not easy for any parent, and I've thought about, if I would have ever adopted, I would have really struggled with that as an adoptive parent, because I know how I struggled as a birth parent, of feeling those feelings of jealousy or, she's always going to be closer to her because that's who raised her and this and that. And all of those things that kind of will roll through your head that are our flesh. Those are our flesh. And there are human desires and wants and all of that. It doesn't mean that we always have to act on those. We can make room for grace, and I can make room to have relationships with her parents and, her other siblings from the other side and all of that. So I think we as humans are the ones that put limitations on all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Based on like societal norms or whatever we think normal is.
Yeah. No, yeah. So now, like present day, what you kind of touched on, how her birth father is a little bit more involved. So, right now being, how old are you now?
I'm 25 or 26. Sorry, 26.
I'm like, wait. I was like, oh no.
I liked 25.
So being 26, having Haven very much involved in your life, birth father involved. What is, this kind of full circle? Like, what does that look like now?
My life is definitely a lot more full. Growing up with just 2 parents, I remember when I was a kid, they're a little bit older, and I would ask them sometimes, what happens? Like when you guys are gone, like what happens? Like it's just me. And they would be like, no, like you'll get married. And I'm like, but what if that doesn't work out? Like, so now I think it's very comforting knowing, like, I don't want to think about them passing away, but it's just very comforting knowing I have so many people now, because my family was always so small growing up that I would always...
Well, she was the only grandchild on both sides.
Yeah, I was the only grandchild.
So, like, her adoptive dad was an only child.
Mm-hmm.
So we're talking, like, no cousins. Like, family holidays, she was the only kid.
Yes, anywhere. I was the only kid.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Now there's, like,
so
all
I would
kinds
worry
of
about that a lot. Like, I remember thinking about that a lot as a kid, worried about being alone. So now it's like, I don't think I'll ever be alone.
Wow. That's such a blessing.
Yeah, it is such a blessing, because I don't ever feel very lonely anymore, because I have so many people to call and check in on. So
I love that. Well, we're going to wrap up because we're getting a little long up here. But is there any final thing you want to say to someone that is kind of in your shoes, that was adopted? And then if there's anything you have something special to say towards another birth mom, just to share to anyone who may be listening that might find themselves in our position that we were in, that grows up hearing about this and has either had the privilege to meet their birth family or to not. Is there something special you want to say towards either of those things?
I mean, I'm really big in my faith. Like, having so many siblings and so much family is something I prayed a really long time for. That's why I also have Ephesians 3:20 on me, because I prayed a long time to have just one sibling, and I got so many more. So, like, don't ever give up hope, because I would have never thought at 18, I thought it was too late for me to have siblings, but
yeah,
it was just the beginning. So
just the beginning.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
It really was. I would just say to like other birth moms, reach out to someone. It's not the end of your life. It will change your life, but it's not going to end your life. And to know that they're worthy.
Oh, I love that. Well, thank you both so much for coming on today and sharing just everything about your lives in the past 26 years, and to be able to see how beautiful this relationship has grown. It's encouraging for me, and I'm sure it can be encouraging for other women and adoptees that find themselves in this position. And I think it's just a beautiful testament of God's faithfulness. And I pray and hope that over myself one day, and I'm sure other people, wish the same. So yeah, I'm so happy you guys came to join me and to talk. Thank you for sharing everything that you did. But if you guys are interested in being a guest on the podcast, like Haven and her birth daughter, Sarah, I would love to have you. You can check out my website or my social media page. We'll have the guest form to fill out if you're interested, and I will respond to those. But yeah, thank you so much for tuning in. This journey is not about where we've just been, but also where we're going. And this is a beautiful testament to that. So thank you so much for listening. Please like, subscribe, and share, and we'll see you next week. Love you. Bye. This is my least favorite part.
It's your least favorite part?
Yeah, only because I just feel so awkward sometimes doing it in front of people, because I'm just like... And I always forget what I'm going to say. For be willing to... Okay, I need to stop. I don't mess that up. Trying to think of,